In 1967, The Illustrious Summer of Love, a psychedelic sunshine pop standard, hit #1 in the US charts. Later, the song was cloaked in a little bit of controversy as it was allegedly based off of an instrumental idea from two of the band members who weren't credited. One who would go on to help compose Sweet Home Alabama and Lynyrd Skynyrd. An interview with the co-founder of this mystery band next on Professor of Rock. Hey music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. Hit the subscribe button right now to be a part of a community that is dedicated to the timeless music of the rock and roll era. And look us up on Patreon to be a part of curating this history. Now, about a month ago, we started a new program on this channel that's dedicated to the greatest one-hit wonders of the rock era. Well, here is episode 2 of that program that we call Bottled Lightning. You know, there are certain songs that, when played, are more effective than a time machine. They evoke the decade better than any other emotion or feeling outside of actually being there. Unfortunately, I never got to experience the 1960s, what I consider to be the greatest decade in music history. I was born in the decade after. But growing up, I got a firsthand experience of that wondrous decade from my dad, who told me all about his experiences coming of age in that time. And I've also heard hundreds of stories from the many artists from that time who released life-changing music in my interviews, I remember my dad telling me about several songs from the 60s that were so potent, so drenched in the sounds of that era, the feeling of that time, that it instantly took him back. To him, Incense and Peppermints was one of those songs, a slice of psychedelic sunshine pop and one of the first #1 hits of that genre by a band with an equally groovy name, Strawberry Alarm Clock. I love it. The song went to #1 in the Summer of Love, like I said, and it's lived on since then in pop culture. There's an interesting story behind it. It was allegedly based off of an instrumental idea by band members keyboardist Mark Weitz and guitarist Ed King. God bless the late Ed King, who passed away a few years ago. Ed would go on to be a charter member of Lynyrd Skynyrd and help create one of the greatest guitar riffs of all time. Definitely one of the most recognizable. Mark Weitz and Ed King created the instrumental idea, only they didn't get any credit for it on Incense and Pepperance. It officially was accredited to producer A&R man John S. Carter and Tim Gilbert of the band The Rainy Days. At the very least, Weitz had stated that he and Ed should have received a co-writing credit. Sadly, it's an oft-told story from the early days of rock and roll, musicians just not being fairly credited or compensated. Now, I had the opportunity to discuss this at length with co-founding member and keyboardist Mark Weitz, and he has the in-depth story of this classic song, along with some other fascinating facts that you can't miss. One-hit wonder status, it's always being debated, you know. Does something qualify as a one-hit wonder if it was the lone hit for a certain artist? Does it have to technically hit the top 40 or the top 10? What if a band had a second top 40 song, you know? Many questions. That's why I'd rather call these songs Bottled Lightning, you know, lightning in a bottle. Strawberry Alarm Clock actually had a second top 40 hit after Incense and Peppermints, a song called Tomorrow that went to #23. Of course, it hasn't had the massive impact that Incense has. So here's the story of the #1 smash from Mark. As we go into this interview, I do want to thank our sponsor, Zenni Eyewear. Check out these glasses. I love them. Go design your own and do a virtual try-on at zenni.com today. Here's Mark with the story. Let's talk about, really get into Incense and Pepperance. Mm-hmm. The album itself went to #11, sold 250,000 copies. A masterpiece of psychedelia. I mean, it really was.
Well, thank you.
Incense and Pepperance, yeah, was a song that I remember as a kid, my dad playing the 45, because he had the 45. My parents would always play the records as I was walking around the house, and that would marinate in me. So when I think of the 60s, there are a couple of key songs. For What It's Worth is one of those songs that must be what the 60s felt like. Stop, children, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going. Turns that way. It's the season, turn. Incense Pepperance is one of those songs. I feel like I'm like getting some kind of energy from the 60s. I don't know. It's just that sound, those vibrations. It's really amazing.
It's stimulating, mind expanding, safer to use than alcohol. It's the in thing.
No drugs. Tell me about that. Because a lot of people always said, oh, there's a drug song.
We were as straight as an arrow in the studio, and most of the time on stage. We were not a druggy band, as people depicted us as. You know, on stage, our songs were complicated. We had to have all our faculties to play. Plus, you're traveling. Did you ever try to have 4 hours of sleep and then do three shows in a day? I mean, that's, you know, you don't want to sound lousy on stage.
Who cares what games we choose? Little to win.
The harmonies you guys came up with. Tell me about that.
A new member of the band at the time, a new drummer came in named Randy Seal. He helped us with the harmonies, and we, at the time, were involved with a vocal coach. His name was Howard Davis. He was the man behind our harmonies on the first, the second, and the third album. He would write these elaborate 40s and 50s kind of close harmonies together.
Wow.
Because that's the era he was from. He was a fantastic piano player. He was the guy that, the harmonies that you hear, the rich harmonies, they took a lot of work. Some sessions we would do nothing but, we'd rehearse ahead of time these harmonies and then go into the studio and it'd still be a tough go at it. We were not professional singers. Most of the guys in the band were 18 years old. So take some 18-year-old guys from a band that started in Burbank, California, and say, you're going to be a perfect harmony singer now. So it was amazing that everybody rose to the occasion. I don't know how we did it. It was a lot of rehearsal before the recording. You don't rehearse in the studio. 4-track was the standard in the industry at the time. Our engineer at Original Sound Studios, his name was Paul Buff, he invented or designed a 10-track machine. Wow. And when we were recording, we thought it was an 8-track, but later on we found out it was a 10-track. There wasn't any 10-track machines around. The backstory on this is that our producer never put out a stereo version of Incense and Peppermints.
Wow.
He said, no, it's a 45. Nobody buys stereo 45s. Everybody's got their little mono player. And to this day, there is no such thing as a stereo version of Incense and Peppermints.
Really?
Yeah, our number one hit. It was recorded in mono on a multi-track machine. When they mixed it down, it was in mono. They never did a stereo mix on it, which was a big mistake. But nevertheless, our producer, Frank Slay Jr., made that decision at the time for whatever reason.
Incense and peppermints, the color of time.
Well, it came from an instrumental that you wrote, and Ed came up with the bridge part, right? Ed King.
Yeah, I had this idea, and I called Ed up on the phone. I said, Ed, I have this.
Which, let's throw it out there. Ed King later was in Lynyrd Skynyrd.
Ed King joined Lynyrd Skynyrd, I believe it was 74, ended up writing one of the major contributors to Sweet Home Alabama.
Oh, yeah.
And that famous lick at the beginning of the song, that's Ed. Ed was great about helping me. I'd get stuck on a song. I said, Ed, I need you to come over. The 4 songs that actually charted on the top 100 Billboard, Ed helped me on when I would get stuck. And I said, Ed, get your butt over here. I've got another section. And somehow, I don't know how we did it, we just worked really great together. Ed was one of those people that we never fought. We never had a mean word to say to each other. We always gelled. We finished the song, originally had 4 verses in it, and it went down to 3. It was running too long. It was into the 4-minute range, and our producer said, we can't go over 3 minutes. Nothing is over 3 minutes in 45.
Right.
It ended up at 3:16, by the way, somewhere in there. But Ed helped me with the bridge, and we went in and recorded a instrumental, no lyrics. The intro, the verse, the bridge, the outro, the major sevenths at the end of the song, that turned out to be the sha-la-las at the end of the song. Our producer had another band or writers working in contract under him. They were in a band called The Rainy Days. They had a novelty song called Acapulco Gold, which actually got LA airplay, but as soon as the disc jockeys figured out what Acapulco Gold was, they yanked it off the air, and that was the end of that. John Carter and Tim Gilbert were the two writers, and Frank Slay sent him a reel-to-reel of the instrumental version of Incense Pepperance. It hadn't been called that yet. In fact, our manager called it The Happy Whistler. I don't know where that came from, but that was the working title, and which, of course, we hated, but that's besides the point. They wrote, somehow, I don't know where the lyrics came from, but John Carter came up with the lyrics. He sent the reel-to-reel back, playing an acoustic guitar, singing Incense Peppermints, crippling mankind, and Frank Slay brought us to his office on Hollywood Boulevard. We sat down. He put it up on the speakers, and we listened. And we listened to the whole song, and we said, wow, where did he come up with those lyrics? Who cares what games we choose, little to win, but nothing. It was rebellious enough that first I said, wow, this is a great, song. There's like innuendo in it. You can think of it in it had a lot of different meanings, and you'd like to keep things that way. You didn't, this means this, and, the reason we said this. Lyrics, it just seemed to flow.
George had said that you guys, I'd read somewhere, were
George
trying
is
to
our
do
bass
British,
player. Yeah.
We're trying to do British accents when you were singing Incense, and that's what kind of got this.
The influence of UK rock and the British invasion, it filtered in a little bit. Sometimes pronunciations, especially from the Beatles. We'd love to talk like, I'd like to introduce you to Appajusa Regslaw. We tried to, to talk like John Lennon or Paul McCartney. They were idols of ours. The movie Hard Day's Night. Love those movies. And sometimes our lyrics would have a little English kind of like intonation to it here and there, although we were not trying to do an English accent. We were just trying to color up the lyrics a little bit.
That you have a song with staying power when it's had resurgence so many different times, being used in Austin Powers. What'd you think about that one? They used it in Austin Powers.
That was a big surprise. That was the one with Groovy Baby and all that. I didn't even know that Incense Peppermints was in that. I was actually in a theater watching it, and there's a crane shot in a disco. They started playing Incense Peppermints. I had no idea.
Really?
Yeah, that was going to be in there. So I was totally taken by surprise on that. And of course, you get on the phone. Hey, we're in Austin Powers, they had to get clearance obviously from the publishers on that to play that. But when you saw, 100 extras sitting there dancing to your song, that was a shot in the arm. That was great.
And The Simpsons.
People, hey, did you guys know you're on The Simpsons,
Actually name-checked when he's talking about medical marijuana.
Yeah.
He's talking about.
It pops up here and there.
Oh, it does, because the record sold 1 million copies. It went gold, went to number one on all the charts.
That was not an easy task. Back in those days, there was no videos on
MTV or YouTube.
There was no internet, obviously, but you had to literally go. We were pounding California from San Diego up to San Francisco, every little small town. We'd stop at every radio station. We'd give a record. We'd meet the disc jockey. He'd play the song on a little 1,000 or 5,000 watt station, which dotted up and down the coast and inland. And that's how you promoted a record back in those days.
Wow.
It was very difficult to get on major airplay in a large metropolitan area like Los Angeles or San Francisco or New York or places like Dallas, Texas. And it was not easy to get on, radio airplay unless you had some help. It took 6 months to get that record to move up a chart.
Wow.
The top 100. I mean, when we got on,
that's 6 months of meeting with the radio
that's 6
station.
months of working hard. We had to push really hard on that record.
It's not hitting the thing to go out to YouTube and waiting for it to kind of,
Nope. It was town by town and dance club by dance club. I mean, we played every little dive that you can book in. You know, Uni Records was very influential in getting that record, and especially Russ Regan, head of A&R at the time, which took a big chance in signing our band onto the Uni label. We were in, I think, Santa Barbara. There was a radio station, KIST, 5,000 watt station out of Santa Barbara, California. Our manager was friends with the main disc jockey there, Johnny Fairchild, which on our first album, we dedicated the album to Johnny because he was the first one to put our songs on the air. And we got a lot of requests from the Santa Barbara area that helped us move into the LA area. So I believe that was it. And when we heard it on LA Airplay months down the road, we were screaming, going down Sunset Boulevard, screaming out the window, "That's us! We're on the radio!" I mean, we were screaming at the top here. We were like hoarse because we couldn't believe that we finally made it to LA Airplay, which was like, I mean, we were ready to die then. We were going to heaven. We're done. You know, we made it.
Good sense, innocence, grip of mankind, dead kings and men.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Do leave us a comment about this psychedelic classic. What are some other Bottle Lightning songs that you think we should cover on this show? Tell us in the comments. I want to hear from you. To hear this song, click on the YouTube playlist. To get some great music from the 60s, including this album, click on our Amazon links below. If you enjoy our content, become a subscriber. Hit the bell so you never miss out. Do that right now. We'd love to have you. Also, make sure to click on our Patreon link for more content and to become a real supporter of this cause of keeping the music alive. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends. Stay safe.